Today, what I want to do, guys, is I want to focus on the fourth step in the process to getting your first deal, and that is finding buyers. Just like I've done with the other steps in getting to your first deal and doing this business, I want to really portray a mindset around finding buyers and really make some paradigm shifts. I want to maybe change some perceptions you might have around this step. And just like everything, I feel like when you really can grasp the big picture and the objective of what we're trying to accomplish and where it fits into the picture, then all of a sudden doing the action steps to do it become way easier because you understand what you're actually trying to do. It really is a matter of just fitting the right pieces of the puzzle together. And then you quickly realize that this isn't overly complicated. I've just been misaligned a little bit. When you have that misalignment, then you're just bringing confusion to the business. And so I want to also, with step 4 here with finding, try to do the same thing and give you a better understanding of this step. And so when we think about buyers and finding buyers and who we're going to take our deals to when we're doing wholesaling, there are really 2 primary buyers in the marketplace. And these are investors. And first, it's fix and flippers. And fix and flippers, as you know, what they do is they're going to buy the property, they're going to put money into it and fix it up, and then they're going to try to sell it for top market value. And then they're going to make a profit when they net out everything. So a fix and flipper, when they look at deals, their primary focus is on the after repair value. You know, what's this thing going to sell for once I fix it up? What's the top market value I can get? So they're heavily focused on that future value, the potential value after renovating. We call that ARV, if you remember from when we did the analyzing step. So they're going to focus on that, and they're going to focus on repairs. Repairs is a really big deal to them because if they miscalculate repairs, then they don't make as much money as they thought. So they're trying to wrap their head around what's the ARV, what's it going to cost me to fix it up? What do I need to do to fix it up so that when I resell it, I get that top dollar? Do I need to, redo the countertops, or can I leave those alone? Or, what things do I need to do to this property to get the most bang for my buck? Like, that's how a fix and flipper thinks. So again, just like I said earlier when we did the analyzing, the best wholesalers are able to put themselves in the shoes of their buyers. They understand their buyer's perspective. They understand how their buyers think, how they look at deals, what's important to them, how they're running their numbers. And the better you understand your buyer, the better you are as a wholesaler. So first, it's fix and flippers. And then our second type of buyer that we could wholesale to are buy and hold investors. And these are investors that they want to keep that property for cash flow. So they're going to buy it, maybe fix it up a little bit. They're going to do minimal repairs because they're renting it out. So they're not going to be doing these big updates and granite countertops, right? They're going to do very minimal updates on properties because they want to rent it out. So they're going to maximize cash flow. And their focus is on rental income. What can I rent this for? What's the bare minimum I need to do to this property, or what's the work I need to do to this property so that I can rent it for $1,800 a month or whatever they want to try to rent it for. So their main focus is on rental income and cash flow. What will this property cash flow? There are other benefits they might look at, like tax benefit and things like that, appreciation. But for the most part, most buy and hold investors, they're going to look at it and they're going to say, okay, is this a deal I want? What can I rent it for? And what kind of cash flow can I generate from this property? But the way these two think is very different. And I hope you guys have to understand this when you get into this business. You have to think about your deal and think, who would be the ideal buyer for this property? Is it a fix and flipper, or is it a buy and hold investor? Now, it can go either way. Some properties could fit either way. Maybe a flipper wants it, maybe a buy and holder wants it. But generally speaking, the higher price point the property, the less buy and hold investors, because buy and hold investors don't cash flow as well, and there's better margins for a flipper. So typically what you'll see is in your higher price point properties is your ideal buyer is a flipper. Whereas if you get down into lower income properties, those are going to primarily be buy and hold investors because they can cash flow a lot more. And it doesn't make a lot of sense to fix and flip low income properties because there's just not a lot of margin there. Does that make sense? But you have to decide. And sometimes it could go either way. So you have to think about, okay, well, how do I present this deal to a buyer? Do I present it to them as a good flip opportunity? Do I present it to them as a good rental opportunity? But that's the question you want to be asking yourself and thinking about and understanding. When it comes to finding these buyers, there's a lot of misinformation or bad information, maybe not bad information, because there's nothing wrong with the way some people teach this. But a lot of people think that in order to get your first deal or in order to start doing this business, you need to have a list of cash buyers. In fact, I know people that are very successful at this business that teach, and they're in the education space, and they teach to first go get a list of cash buyers. So if you've been taught that, or if you've seen that taught, or if you thought that, if that's what you understand, that first you find the buyers and then you go find the deals, and you need to find a list of buyers before you even start farming for deals. If you've been taught that, go ahead and put that in the comments. I want to see how many of you have thought that. Cash buyer first, deal second. And when we think about that idea around find some buyers first, it makes sense. Like, I get it. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that strategy, because if you've got some buyers and you know they're looking for deals, then when you find a deal, you're like, okay, well, I've got some people I could take my deal to. So it's not a bad idea. It's not wrong necessarily. I just don't think it's the right way to do things. Remember, everything is about the right sequences. We can do something and it be in the wrong order and it messed the whole thing up. It could just be wrong, right? I'm seeing lots of yeses in the comments. So a lot of people have this idea that I first need to go find cash buyers. Now, I'm going to challenge this idea. In fact, if you think about it between the two ideas, right? If I'm going to spend time right now as a new investor working on my first deal, even my first year in the business, which one of the two is harder? Finding a good deal that people want, buyers are going to want, finding that really good deal, or finding buyers in the marketplace that want good deals? Which one? Leave a comment right now and just say, ask yourself right now, if I had to put a percentage of difficulty next to finding a deal or finding buyers that are looking for deals, which one would you say is harder? Which one would take more effort, more time, more energy, more difficult to get? A good deal or a buyer in the marketplace or buyers in the marketplace? There's a comment here, finding a good deal, 95%. Guys, yes, the effort, the challenge, the difficulty, the hardest part of the two is finding a good deal. Not buyers. Buyers are all around you. In fact, I'm going to show you in a minute how to find hundreds and thousands of buyers right in your backyard, right next to your deal, right in the same neighborhood as where your deal is. They are all around you. Buyers is the least of your worries. Finding a buyer is not your primary focus in the beginning. Now, should you find buyers and build a buyer list? Of course you should. That's a smart idea. Always build a buyers list. Start right now. If you have 0 buyers on your buyers list, start doing things to build 1 buyer, 2 buyers, 5 buyers, 10 buyers, 100 buyers, 1,000 buyers. Building a list of buyers is always a good idea. That's always smart. But that's something we do as we go. As we go along, we build the buyers list. It's not what we do to get our first deal, is a buyer first. I agree with Tom Morgan. You have a good deal, buyers will come. Guys, I've never not found a buyer for a good deal. Now, I've not found buyers for a bad deal. Everybody cannot find a buyer for a bad deal. That's easy because it's a bad deal. But if you get a good deal, the buyers will come. They'll want it, and you won't have a problem finding a buyer. Okay, so this is a mindset shift that I really want you to take to heart here. Your job in the beginning here is to not worry so much about a list of buyers, but rather you need a buyer. When you get a deal, all it takes is 1 cash buyer to do your first deal. Just one buyer that will take your deal is all you need to do your first deal. You do not need a list of buyers. A list of cash buyers is a much different idea than a cash buyer for your deal. So go ahead and comments right now and say, Jerry, that makes a lot of sense. If I'm going to pick time right now and I've got limited time and I'm working on my first deal, putting my effort into finding a good deal would be a much better use of time than putting my time into finding buyers. Because here's what happened, guys. This is where the conversation goes. Let's say that you're finding buyers first and you call up a buyer and it goes like this. You say, hey, Mr. Buyer, I'm an investor and are you looking for deals? Yes, you're looking for deals. Okay. If I find a deal, will you buy it? That's all you're going to ask them, right? Like you don't have a deal yet, but you're going to say to a cash buyer, if I find a deal, will you buy it? What is a cash buyer going to say? What are they going to say? Leave a comment right now and tell me what you think a cash buyer would say. Here's what they're going to say, guys. They're going to say, yes, call me when you get a deal. Okay, thank you. So it's just not a good use of time, right? It's like, I feel the same way about private money when I'm doing money deals. If I call a private money investor and I say, hey, if and when I find a good deal, will you lend me the money to buy the deal? What's a private money investor going to say? They're going to say, maybe, I don't know. I got to look at the deal. Call me when you get a deal and we'll take a look at it, right? Like, it's just not a good use of time. The right thing would be call a private money investor and say, hey, I got a good deal. Here's why it's a good deal. Here's a breakdown. Here's the comps. Here's the repairs. Here's why I think this is a great investment. Will you fund my deal? Now you can have like a high level conversation. It's a valuable conversation. Guys, it all starts with deals. If you have to choose, focus on the deal. Now, let's think about who your ideal cash buyer is. Let's say that you have no cash buyers. You don't know a single cash buyer, which is totally fine. In fact, this is how I do most of my deals. Most of my deals, I do not sell the deal to already existing cash buyers. Every single deal, I first try to find a brand new buyer or brand new buyers for my deal, because I want to build my list, and there might be a better buyer that I don't already know that I want to try to find. So your ideal buyer is someone that's local from the area, someone that's active. So active meaning they're currently doing deals or they've recently done deals, and they're close in proximity to your deal, meaning within a few blocks or in the same neighborhood or in the same area as your deal. Now, why? All investors love to do deals in markets where they've already done deals or where they're currently doing deals. Everyone does that. Buy and hold investors, they love to have more rentals where they already have rentals. Fix and flippers, they love to flip in neighborhoods where they've already flipped or where they're currently flipping. Why? They understand values. They have contractors there. They know what's going on. They've got a team. Everything is easier once you've done deals in the same areas you've already done deals. So when you think about it, when you get a deal, who's your ideal buyer? Well, it's going to be someone that's local in the area, somebody that's actively doing deals in that same market close by your property. If you can find those buyers, then you are going to find one for your deal. That's who you want to go after to find a buyer for your deal. There's this strategy that I developed. I call it the neighborhood flipper method. This is where you're going to go look at who's actively flipping in the same neighborhood. You're going to look at sold properties that were flips. How do you know they were a flipper? Because it's going to be fully renovated. It's going to be vacant because no one's living in it. It's a flipper. And sometimes it's going to be staged. So I can tell in 3 seconds when I look at a property if it was a flipper, because it's fully renovated, it's vacant, and sometimes it's staged. And I know instantly this was a flipper. And then I can look at the history on what happened. I can see, okay, they bought it for 100, they spent money on it, and they sold it for 250, right? This was a flipper. So we want to find them. And we're going to do that finding this neighborhood flipper method. I'm going to show you how to do this. And guys, this strategy I developed on my third deal 20 years ago. I stumbled upon this strategy. I was driving for dollars. This is my third deal ever, third wholesale deal ever, about 20 years ago. And I drove by this house. It had a for sale sign in the yard from a real estate agent. So it was a listed property. And right on the front door, it had a big condemned sign. So that means the city condemned it for, being in really bad condition. And I pulled over, got on my pickup truck. I walked up and I looked in the windows, and it was gutted down to the studs inside. And it was a little house. It was probably 800 square feet. This is in like an inner city Detroit neighborhood in Detroit. And I call the sign and I talked to the agent. The agent's like, yeah, we've had this listing forever. It's condemned. You got to bring it out of condemnation, which means you got to go before the city and do all this stuff. And I'm like, what's the asking price? And he tells me, I make an offer for $4,000. I think it was listed for like $8,000 or something like that. I don't remember. We go back and forth. This is just on the phone. He doesn't even talk to the seller. He must just know the bottom line. Anyway, we settle at, I think it was $6,000. Like, guys, this is really low income. So we settle at $6,000. And he says, I'll fax you over the paperwork to sign. Leave a comment and say, I remember faxing, Jerry. Yeah, you dated yourself on how old you are. So this was like 2004, and agents still used fax machines a lot. So he said, I'll fax you over the contract later. So I go, okay, great. Now I get in my pickup truck and I start driving away, and I round the corner and I go to the next block. I turn the corner and I'm driving, and I look to my left and I see some people up on a roof, and they were contractors and they were fixing the roof. So I pull over and I get out of my truck. There's like 3 or 4 guys up on the roof, and I say, hey, I'm looking for the owner of this property. do you guys know who it is? My thought process was, maybe this is an investor and they're fixing the roof on a rental property, and this might be a buyer. So there's a guy up on the roof. He climbs down the ladder, real skinny, tall, black guy. Larry Parsons was his name. I'll never forget Larry. So he comes down and he walks up to me and he says, I'm the owner of this property. This is a rental and this is my crew and we're here working. What can I do for you? And I said, oh, okay, nice to meet you. I said, around the corner, I've got a property that I'm selling and I'm wondering if maybe you're interested. And he says to me, well, let's go look at it. I'm like, oh, okay. So he says, I'll jump in your car. So he jumps in my pickup truck. Just met this guy. He's in the pickup truck with me. We drive back around the corner, go back up to the house. Literally, guys, I hung up with the real estate agent 5 minutes ago. We get out of the car. I stand there on the sidewalk. He does the same thing I did. He walks up, sticks his face in the window, looks in the window, looks at the condemned sign. He says, what do you want for it? Remember, I got the contract for $6,000. I'm like, $12,000. And he looks at me, he looks back at the house, peeks in the window again. He goes, make it 10 and we got a deal. We shake hands. I was brought up where when you shake your hand, that's your word. So we shook hands on it and I said, okay, I'll send you over some paperwork later. And literally I found the deal. I found a local investor, put the two together in that whole time frame between the deal. Now I had to follow up with paperwork, but literally putting the deal together was like 10, 15 minutes. And that's when a light bulb moment went off in my head. I thought to myself, when I find deals, people that are investing already right in that immediate neighborhood, that's who I need to find. That's who I should go to, because this guy was no different. He had lots of rental properties. I later found out that he had dozens of rental properties all throughout town. He really liked that neighborhood that I was in. He had a bunch of properties in that same neighborhood, up and down those same streets. And so picking up another one was like a great idea. Now, this is a buy and hold guy. The sign was out in the yard. He could have called and done the deal and all of that himself. He didn't. He's busy doing his thing. He's up on a roof, for crying out loud. And he ended up becoming like one of my go-to buyers, just an awesome guy. We became really good friends and I wholesaled him lots of deals over time. But I found him following that same method. Now, you can do the same method driving for buyers, I call it, right? Where you drive around and find buyers. Or we can also use technology today without having to drive around necessarily like I did. And I'm going to show you how to do that on Propwire. But what we're going to do is we're going to go into Propwire and you're going to put in the city where your deal is. Okay. So right now, if you don't have a deal, you're just going to practice doing this so you understand how it works. But once you have a deal, you're going to put in the city, because that's the smallest demographic, would be a city, because you have city, zip, county. So you're going to put in the city where your deal is. Then you're going to click the lead type flip properties, and then you're going to zoom into the neighborhood where your deal is. So let me show you some screenshots of what this looks like. You're going to pick the city, then you're going to go to the lead type called flipped properties. The way we define a flipped property in the data is any deed that's transferred in an 18-month period. Some of those might not be technically flippers, like somebody quick claim deeded, or they moved it from, their entity to a trust or something. It might pick those up. So you'll want to look through those and see. And all you do really is you just go into the history and it will show you what happened. So what you're looking for there is, they bought it 4 months ago for 120 and then they sold it in 4 months later for 250, right? And you're like, okay, that was a flipper because I see what they did. They bought it and sold it in 4 months. That's somebody I want to talk to. Then once you click on that, it's going to generate a list for you. Then what you're going to do is you're going to use the draw feature and you're going to zoom into the neighborhood. Now, what I did here on this zoom in is I basically went like half a mile radius. I make a box out of that with the draw feature. You could see there, all of those property tags right there, those white boxes, those are flipped properties. So there's, how many ever there are, a dozen of them or so in that little neighborhood. And that's where I start. Now, if I work through that list, I'll branch out a little bit. Maybe I'll go another mile this way, or I'll go that way, up, down on the streets. But what I'm doing is I'm going to start really concentrated. I'm going to look for flip properties really close to my property, and then I'll start to expand out if I need to. Guys, I've never not found a buyer doing this technique. Okay, you will find a buyer if you have a deal. Now, if you don't have a deal, you won't find a buyer. But if you have a deal, one of these flippers is going to want your deal. We can also do the same strategy with cash buyers. So we're going to go into the city. We're going to click the lead type cash buyers. We're going to zoom into the neighborhood. And then we're going to do a couple filters. And I'm going to show you these filters here. First, again, you're going to go to the cash buyer category. Now, this is going to pull up a massive list. And keep in mind here, guys, 30% of all real estate is owned free and clear, so cash. So we want to narrow that down, obviously, to just investors. So I'll show you how we do that. So we're going to click the cash buyer category, and then we're going to go into the more filters. Then we're going to go down to owner filters, and we're going to put owner occupied no, meaning we don't want to look at cash transactions where it was a homeowner who bought the property, because that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for investors. Okay, so we're going to say no owner occupied under the owner filter. Then what we're going to do is we're going to go into the financial filter, and we're going to put last sale date, and then we're going to put a 12-month window. So we'll put in from 12 months ago from the day you do the search to today's date. Now, why are we doing that? Because we want to look at active investors. I don't necessarily want to look at a cash buyer who bought something 5 years ago. I want to look at a cash buyer who's buying recently within the last 12 months, meaning they're active, they're doing deals, and that will also filter us down to get a smaller list. After we do that, then we're going to have a list now of cash buyers. These could be flippers, they could be buy and hold investors, it could be a combination. So you got two different methods you can find these buyers right in Propwire for free. Guys, it's free. Search and download as much as you want for free. That's what's so cool about this. So now what? We've got this list, we've got these flip properties, or we've got this cash buyer list. Now what do we do? Well, one thing that I like to do is rather than go directly to the investor, which you could do, you would just select your list, fund your wallet, skip trace it, and then call those buyers. And you would call the buyer and say, hey, I noticed that you bought a property recently. I've got a deal nearby. Are you interested? What I prefer to do, especially with flip properties, is I want to call the agent who represented the flipper when they sold it. I want to call up that agent, and I'm basically going to say, hey, I'm calling you because I noticed that you were the listing agent for a flipper on 123 Main Street. I have a property I'm looking to sell on that same street or around the corner or in the same neighborhood, and I'm wondering if your investor might be interested in another property to flip. That's your script, guys. You call up that agent and you just say it like that. A question I get often is, do you compensate the agent? And you could, but I don't. And the reason why I don't offer compensation to the agent, and what I found is that agents are more than willing to go to their investor with your deal. Two reasons why. One, they're bringing value to their client because they're going to their client and they're saying, hey, I might have a lead for you on another deal. So they look good to their client. They're bringing value. And so that's going to solidify their relationship with their flipper is if they're bringing them deals. So they'll say to their flipper, hey, you know what? There's an investor. He's got a deal. It's right around the corner from the last one we sold. I think you should check this out. It might be something you want. The other reason is if that flipper buys your deal, that agent's going to get another listing to sell. They're going to get another flip property to sell because that flipper is going to feel obligated to that agent because the agent brought them the deal after all. So the agent knows that, right? So most of the time, I would say 99% of the time, the agents are more than willing to do this for you. You don't have to compensate them. And it's going to be faster to your deal because you're not tracking down buyers now. The listing agent's info is right on Zillow, Redfin, or any of the sites, right? It's easy to find the listing agent than it is to find the buyer. It's a little more work. Now, afterwards, should you go back into that list, skip trace it, call them? Heck yeah, definitely. Or if you want to do that in addition, like let's say that, an agent's not responsive, they're not talking to their flipper. Okay, fine. Maybe skip trace it, call them up and see if you can go around the agent directly to the flipper. Like there's nothing wrong with that. But I'm just saying you don't need to. You can go directly to agents and typically get them to talk to their buyer. Now, here's the thing, guys. It takes about 12 to 15 agents that represented flippers following the neighborhood flipper method for me to find a buyer. It literally is about 12 to 15. Sometimes it's this first or second one, but it does not take a lot to find a buyer for your deal. Think how cool this is, guys. You've got no buyer list. You have no buyer in mind at all. You get a good deal and you find somebody local that's in that neighborhood that's going to want your deal. That's it. That's how we get to our first deal. In fact, not only is that how we get to our first deal, but that's my first method every time I get a deal. Every time I get a deal, I first want to reach out to flippers in the neighborhood that I don't yet know. In my active markets, it's very fun because sometimes we'll be like, oh, we know that guy. Oh, we know that guy. Oh, we know that flipper. So it's cool. We get to call up the flipper we already know that's already on our list. And we get to say, hey, how's it going? I got one around the corner you might want. Better jump on it. Okay, now let's talk for a minute here, guys, about the process to secure the buyer. So these are the steps that I like to follow. First thing I want to do is I want to do what I call an inspection party. And really, it's just an open house. And the idea behind this is what you're going to do is you're going to set a time. And it's going to be a block of time, like 12 to 2. And this is the only time your buyers can go see the property. Now, if you're one-offing it with the neighborhood flipper model, maybe you talk to a couple people and you take a buyer. But as you build a list and as you start to create a lot of momentum, doing an inspection party is an awesome strategy. This is how we like to do it. So it's an open house. It's a set time. This is the only showing. So you have to communicate that. This is how you create scarcity for buyers to want your deal. It's the only time you're going to get to see it. If you want to see it outside of this window, you're going to miss out on the deal. Because what I want to do is I want to get all the buyers that I talk to in the market, and I want to get them at that open house. So we post it on all the investor groups. We send it out to our list. Even the neighborhood flipper people we call, we're like, hey, you really should check it out. We're doing an open house on Wednesday from 12 to 2. Bring your flipper over there, right? Like we want to bring all of these buyers at the same time to your inspection party. This is one I just did, by the way, guys. I just did this at a house I flipped in Detroit. This was here a couple of weeks ago from this recording, and I made a big fuss about it. I put it out everywhere, and we got a whole group of people, and my buyer ended up showing up at that and the eventual buyer for my deal. The way we position this is we say, this is my asking price. And I want to position it as an asking price. You want to have an asking price because you want to give everybody like an idea of what you want for the deal. But again, it's an asking price. And the way we communicate this to all our buyers that are interested is we say, come take a look at it, come to the open house, and we're going to take the highest and best offer we get by the next day at 4 p.m. And you give a deadline. So that gives everybody time to come to the open house, come to the inspection party, run their numbers. We'll tell them, bring your investors, bring your contractors, because this is your only chance to see it. And then we're going to be taking the highest offer we get by the following day at 4 p.m. Give everybody a window of time. And now what you're going to see is you're going to draw out the highest paying buyer. That's why we do this. We're trying to find out who's the highest paying buyer. And we'll often make our asking price really low. So for example, if I have the contract for 100,000, we might make it 105 asking price. Why? Because I want to get a really low number so that it's a smoking deal in everybody's minds. And then I want to create an auction frenzy, get everybody hyped up and excited, competing with each other from the energy. And then someone always way overbids the asking price. That's the goal, that they way overbid it because they don't want to risk losing it. And so they're going to bid it their highest number they can get. This works virtually as well. It just means that you need boots on the ground, someone that's representing you, that's going to be at that inspection party, and they're just managing things. They're making sure that nothing's going on behind your back. They're making sure if it's a listed property that people aren't having these side conversations with an agent or with the seller if it's occupied and there's a seller there. But you can run these virtually. I very rarely go to these. And this is something, by the way, guys, that we teach extensively. I'm just trying to hit this high level with you and really help you understand the big picture of this. In my coaching and fast track program, we really dive deep on all the mechanics and details and how you find that person, how you hire them, what that job description looks like, and all the things. Then what we're going to do is we're going to choose the highest offer when the offers come in. And we're not going to reveal to other people those offers. So the one thing you don't want to do here is be like, hey, Jim, I got another offer that's $5,000 higher, come up to that number and I'll give it to you. What that does is it trains your buyers to not trust your numbers and your process. So I'll just tell them, I'll say, look, I've wholesaled you 10 houses before. I'd love to wholesale you this one, but I've got other people that are interested in it. I'm getting other offers. You really just need to come in with your best number. And if it's the best number, I'll make sure you get it. It's only fair to everybody that the highest offer gets the deal. And that's how I want to position that. And then you're going to send them your assignment. The assignment contract is what allows you to wholesale your deal. You're going to then flip your contract. In that assignment, one thing that's very, very important is you have a non-refundable earnest money, and it needs to be sizable. So like on a low income deal, it's $2,500, non-refundable. If the cash buyer falls through, you get the $2,500. But on most deals, it's $5,000 or higher is what we require for non-refundable earnest money from our cash buyer. And that, again, that commits them to the deal. Anything less than that, like $500, a buyer will walk from $500. If a better deal comes along before closing, they'll forfeit their $500. That's not that hard to do for somebody. $5,000? No one's walking from $5,000. They will perform on the deal. So that's the process, guys. And just a side note here, one way to think about this too on your first deal is maybe just JV with another wholesaler, right? Don't worry about disposition. We call finding the buyer dispo. Maybe don't worry about dispo on your first deal. You can always JV with another wholesaler. You found the deal, let them bring the buyer, let them handle all the showing, the paperwork, and then you split with them 50-50. It's very common for a lot of people to do that. In fact, In my Fast Track community, we have a lot of that goes on there. As a community, there's a lot of people that work together on deals. We have new students that JV with our experienced students, and that's happening there every day. So that's a very common way to do that. But I will say this, if you go back through the process I just taught, you can do this even on your first deal. It's not that complicated. The assignment contract is 1 page. It's not overly complicated, and finding a buyer is not overly complicated if you know how to do it. But I feel like when you JV with someone, you're giving up half the profit. You could double your money if you just learned how to find your own buyers. And like I showed, it's not overly complicated.